Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We have some quiet. My name is Tajuddin Ahmed, and I'm the chairman of the NBCC Programs Committee. I'm pleased to physically and virtually welcome you to this event themed Embracing Equity. I'm particularly delighted to see our council and ESCO members, our distinguished guest speakers and panelists, and all our esteemed guests. Please rise as we observe the national anthems of Nigeria and Britain. Be seated. Before we begin, let me state some housekeeping guidelines. For our physical attendees, questions will be answered during the Q&A session. Please raise your hands and a microphone will be brought to you. For those joining us on the virtual mode, if the volume is too low, kindly check your system volume. This event is being recorded and will be available live on our YouTube channel, Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, NBCC. For comments and discussions, you should use the chat icon. To submit your questions via the Q&A, which will be answered only at the session. For posts on social media, kindly use the hashtag NBCCIWD 2023, hashtag Embrace Equity. The Embrace Equity, the first letter should be capital E. Thank you for listening. Before I introduce our President and Chairman of Council, I seek our indulgence to give us a minute to do this. This is not in the script, but I'm trying to adapt what we saw in Matthew chapter 4, verse 4, that says, man shall not live by scripts alone. So, before the IWD theme, the thematic focus for this year was set to be Embrace Equity at the NBCC, where Nigeria's leading and foremost Chamber of Commerce. We've actually embraced equity long ago. And I'm going to mention certain names to you to show that we've actually embraced equity long ago. The president and chairman of council of this very profound Chamber of Commerce is a lady, Mrs. Bisi Adeyemi. The director general, as the field commander of this chamber, is actually a lady as well, Mrs. Ayomide Olajide. In this chamber, we have 2 chairmen of very powerful committees and groups that are ladies, and 8 vice chairmen. You can't find it anywhere in any chamber in this country. The chairman of the Advocacy Committee is Ms. Anne Rino. She's joined virtually. The chairman of the technology group is Mrs. Sholakwe Akinpelu. The vice chairman of our learning, education, and training group is Mrs. Janet Adetu. The vice chairman of our programs committee, my able deputy, Mrs. Adenike Birogba. The chairman of the MSME committee, Mrs. Roslyn Onolaja. The vice chairman of British Business Committee, Mrs. Ini Abimbola. The vice chairman of the energy group, Mrs. Adiola Aziz. The vice chairman of the trade and investment committee, Mrs. Lara Kayode. She's here. The vice chairman of the Nigeria-British Gulf Committee, Ms. Elizabeth Olaure. She's here as well. And finally, the vice chairman of our creative and cultural committee, Mrs. Banke Meishida Lawal. So we can see that we embrace equity. So without much ado, may we clap for our President Chairman of Council as she comes to take our welcome address. Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. Good morning, ladies and ladies present here and online, and the few gentlemen who are joining us here and virtually. I would like to specially recognize and welcome our patron and past president, Mrs. Adeleke. Please give her a round of applause. And other council members here present. I'm delighted to welcome you to NBCC as we celebrate this year's International Women's Day, Embracing Equity. The Chamber is delighted to join the global community in celebrating the achievements of women in the social, economic, cultural, and political sectors worldwide. We cannot ignore the barriers that women continue to encounter. I won't bore you with the statistics. To embrace equity is to be just, fair, and inclusive. An equitable society is one in which all can participate and prosper. We must collectively create conditions that allow each person to attain their full potential. Equity creates a path from hope to change. Please join me in welcoming our patron and past president, Chief Asiwaju Olawale. Thank you for joining us, sir. The sub-theme of this year's IWD is Digital, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equity. Cannot be more apt. Innovation and technology are transforming societies, breaking down barriers and creating opportunities for women and girls. And I'm delighted to see the young ladies from Doen, right? Vivian Fowler again join us. A round of applause for them. They've always consistently participated in our programs, and I'm delighted that they're joining us this morning. We must ensure that women and girls are not left behind in the digital transformation and that they have equal access to the resources they need to succeed. At the NBCC, in pursuit of our agenda to bridge the gender gap in the tech sector, we didn't wait for 2023. We, in 2021, launched the NBCC Tech Academy, which is essentially an academy for young women to improve their skills in technology. The first cohort of women and, well, sadly, and men, when we launched the academy, our intention was that it would be strictly women. But again, the biases that exist, how can you have a gender non-biased or non-gender diverse academy? So we had to admit a couple of men. I don't want to tell you the ratio, but anyway, there were some men in the team. So the first cohort graduated late last year. We're launching the second cohort on March 23rd. I will invite you, those who can join us, to please do so. We continue to celebrate our NBCC Women in Tech, led by the chair of our tech committee, Mrs. Sholakwe Akinpelu. I think she's on her way here. Round of applause for her. And our other women in tech. Is she here? Not yet. She's on her way. Thank you. I would in particular like to celebrate our patron and past president, the first female president of the NBCC, Mrs. Adeleke. She's 80 plus. And she's here today. Please stand up and give her a round of applause, please, to celebrate her. Thank you very much, ma'am. She continues to inspire us, even as she supports all our initiatives. Thank you very much, ma'am. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker. I think he's on his way, Mr. Lasana Wane. Is he here? He's on his way. And our speakers for today, Ms. Yemi Kerry, CEO, Hakabela, and co-founder, Rising Tide Africa. Thank you, Yemi, for joining us. Our moderator for today, Ms. Neros Suresan. Suresan, apologies if I didn't pronounce it well. And the other speakers that will be joining us, I believe Banke Meshida is on her way. I would like to thank our sponsors, the Bank of Industry. They've also always been supportive. A round of applause for them, please. And the programs committee led by Mr. Tajuddin Ahmed, who I hope doesn't feel threatened today, that the odd gentleman in our midst. Thank you very much. Enjoy your morning.
May we honor our President, Chairman of Council once again. That is vintage President and Chairman of Council. Without much ado, I'm going to invite Mr. Lassana Wone, the Deputy Country Representative, UN Women Affairs, who is joining us on the virtual mode to give his main speech as a guest speaker. Mr. Wone, we project him.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. Please permit me to stand on the already established protocol. It is an honor for me to join you at the virtual event today, or join you virtually at the event today, which is part of the celebration of the International Women's Day 2023. The headline theme for this year's International Women's Day is Embrace Equity, and that coincides exactly with the theme of the event today. This theme highlights the importance of gender equity in all aspects of life, including education, employment, healthcare, politics, and social norms. It is a call to action to ensure that women and girls have equal opportunities and access to resources, and to dismantle systematic barriers that prevent them from achieving their full potential. For too long, we have been talking about gender equality. And this year, we are embracing equity. So what do we mean by equity, and how does it differ from equality? So while gender equality is about providing women with the same opportunity as men, gender equity is about addressing imbalance or imbalances that can sometimes prevent women from making the most out of those opportunities. It is also about creating an enabling environment that empowers women and girls to participate fully in public and private life. This requires addressing existing gender disparities in education, employment, and income. The theme for this year is particularly important for the Chamber's mission. Talking about the private sector, we all know that women, and particularly women entrepreneurs, dominate the private sector in Nigeria. And there are studies that show that women have the same objective and drive to run their enterprises. But those same studies by McKinsey, by MasterCard, suggest that women's own businesses don't thrive as much as those of their male counterparts. So what are the causes? The causes are that even though there are policies in this country which are gender neutral, which probably from a private sector point of view may not discriminate against women or men. The reality, however, is that there are historical gender imbalances that cannot allow women to perform as men in a gender neutral policy framework. And therefore, we have to do a lot more to be able to make sure that we address those imbalances. Many of them are rooted in social norms outside the formal policy frameworks and laws. From the UN Women's side, for instance, we're implementing a program called affirmative procurement. And what the objective of that program is to make sure that women entrepreneurs get significant access to procurement supply chains of government and the private sector. We all know that government procurement constitutes a huge part of the GDP in Nigeria, and some estimates show it to be around 27 to 30%. But whereas you have so many women entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses, the vast majority of government contracts do go to the male folks. And the reason is that those male folks, male-led businesses, have been in existence for too long. They have better networks, and they are more connected to people in politics, in bureaucracies, etc. So a neutral procurement policy or procurement act, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, would not necessarily give the same opportunity to women entrepreneurs as their male counterparts, because they don't have the foundation. When I had the opportunity to talk to the lead procurement authority in this country, he told me that, why are you promoting affirmative procurement? In this country, we don't have affirmative laws, because our laws, procurement laws, give equal opportunity to women and men, and therefore you don't need to do anything extraordinary. But the reality is that get out to the streets, and you can see that when women are given contracts by government, the smallest part they get, they do perform them very well. However, very few of that do get to the women. And until we take deliberate action to make sure that the playing field is corrected, that will reflect the actual reality and needs of women in that sector, we are not likely to strengthen their enterprises. So the vicious cycle will continue. Going forward, for the United Nations this year, the International Women's Day is celebrated under the theme Digital, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. And it's a reflection on the fact that the global village is progressing, is modernized, that we're in the digital era, and whether it's in business or politics, the reality is that innovation and technology should now be the driver. Here also, we see it very relevant because there is a significant gap, gender gap, even in that state. In that space, women are far behind. There are a lot of young women in Nigeria who are doing so much. But if you look at the tech industries in Nigeria, less than 13% of them are being led by women. So it's important for us to recognize that the future is about technology, and therefore a true mechanism for promoting gender equality and equity is making sure that women are in that space. And how do we make sure that women are in that space? The reflection should not be only on the current entrepreneurs or people who are in the status of what we call women today. We should go beyond that and look very much at the upcoming generation. And therefore, we should make STEM education very important, very significant for girls, as we do for boys. Indeed, digital innovation presents significant opportunities for economic growth and development. The gender gap in access is still persistent and is hindering women's participation in technology. To bridge the gap, we must provide women with access to digital technology. We should encourage young girls in school to enroll in STEM education, and we should train even older women in digital literacy and computer skills. UN Women, the United Nations entity for gender equality and the empowerment of women, is charged with overseeing gender equality and the empowerment of women. And in collaboration with the African Union, the International Telecommunications Union, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, We've launched the African Girls Can Code initiative since 2018. The initiative is working to empower girls across Africa by helping them build digital literacy and computer skills and placing them on the path to tech careers. Women's equal participation in public and private life is not only a moral imperative, but it also makes for a better business and more resilient communities. The lifetime income gap between women and men caused the wealth of countries globally by 106.2 trillion US dollars, accounting for 11.4% of regional wealth in sub-Saharan Africa. Gender equality could increase women's human capital from $283 billion to $453.2 billion US dollars. In Nigeria, for instance, there is a study that shows that by strengthening gender equality, by promoting gender equality and gender equity, and by making sure that women's enterprises are supported and barriers are removed from them, the GDP will grow by 23% in 2025. At this point, I want to thank and commend the organizers of this event, but also the many participants, including grassroots civil society organizations, the private sector representatives, and other stakeholders who continue to shape the agenda around women's increased leadership and representation and gender equality. We know, for instance, that one of the significant challenges we have in Nigeria has to do with women's political participation. Previously, we were talking about less than 5% representation, and the outcome of these ongoing elections is not likely to make it any better. But we all know that for you to get a fair share of the cake, you must be around the table. And so the fact that you have very small representation of women in political decision making, it is unlikely that the needs and concerns of women will be addressed by a majority group of men who are in the political class. And so there is still a lot of work to do for all stakeholders in the gender equality space. And that is where we should enforce equity. That is where equity is important. Yes, women can become members of political parties. Yes, the laws of the political parties don't deprive women. But we all know that the political class in this country is dominated by men and is very much a male society, with very few women getting into that society. If we don't take deliberate action to get more women into that space, it is unlikely that we will promote greater participation of women in every aspect of the society. In UN Women, we are very much aware of the strength and capability of the Nigerian women. And that is being demonstrated by the high level of representation of Nigerian women in international organizations. Talk about Amina Mohammed, talk about the Director General of WTO. The numbers will go on and on. But even within Nigeria itself, we know that 20% of the leadership in private corporate institutions are held by women. And those institutions that have deliberately promoted women's leadership in the private sector are realizing better profits based on the data that I have. That should encourage stakeholders in this country to promote equity, to make sure that our laws are not gender neutral, and simply because we started from a point where our societies were gender biased and they have remained gender biased against women and girls. And therefore, I will urge all stakeholders to continue to work even harder to making sure that Nigeria truly embraces equity. And one way, significant way of embracing equity is promoting affirmative actions in the laws and practices at all levels of governance, but also in the private sector. Once more, I thank you very much for inviting UN Women to be part of this event. and for giving me the honor to give this speech. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wune, a round of applause again for that very crisp, profound, and very well received and well presented presentation. We invite the sponsors video. We're sponsored today by Bank of Industry, BOI. We'll play their video commercial for 2 minutes before the panel starts. BOI.
For over 6 decades, Bank of Industry has been here, driving Nigeria's industrial development through financial and business support services to micro enterprises, small and medium enterprises, and large enterprises across Nigeria. Leveraging on strategic partnerships, we provide equipment financing, working capital, and support to enterprises in key sectors of Nigeria's economy, including youth and women-led enterprises. Whatever your business needs, starting up, expansion, diversification, modernization, or rehabilitation, we'll be here, always to support you. Bank of Industry, transforming Nigeria's industrial sector.
Sponsors, Bank of Industry. Thank you. I'm going to introduce the moderator of the panel session today. She's Ms. Neros Oyegun Sorensen, the partner and chief operating officer at Virod Capital Management. Ms. Sorensen is the chief. Yeah, we can. Why not? Ms. Nerosin is the chief operating officer at Virod Capital. Prior to joining Virod, she was the head of Africa and Nigeria coverage at CDC Group, where she supported the growth of CDC investment footprint in the region, with an emphasis on developing management and organizational capacity within the portfolio and beyond. She was previously the head of corporate finance and investor relations at Ladol, and also had project finance and corporate strategy experience from Macquarie Capital and investment banking experience from Goldman Sachs & Co. She's a director of Tangerine Financial Holdings Bestseller Foundation. Ms. Sorensen has a BSc in Mathematics and Economics from Columbia University, and an MSc in Finance from London Business School, LBS, where she served at the Dean's Alumni Council. Our moderator is filled with fire and brimstone in terms of experience and academic. So we're in safe hands. And she has also a group of very, very, very solid women on the panel. I wish I was in this panel today. May I invite Ms. Sorensen to introduce our panelists.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sajid. That was very generous of you. So really excited by this panel today. We have Ada Osademe Udechukwu, who works at one of our partner companies, actually, at Virod. Ada is the Senior Gender Advisor for Africa at the International Finance Corp. She's a gender and finance expert with many years of experience in the banking sector. She's overseen initiatives aimed at reducing gender disparities in the workplace and in entrepreneurship. Very, very excited to have her on the panel today. As I say, we work very closely with the IFC at Virod, and the initiatives and projects that they sponsor in gender are really moving the needle and making a difference. We have Yemi Kerry. Also very excited to have her. I know Yemi personally as a member of Rising Tide Africa. Yemi was a co-founder of Rising Tide Africa, which is a women's organization that's basically been founded to increase the participation of women in investments and in an asset class that's becoming increasingly important here. Yemi is also the CEO and founder of Heka Bella and a member of the NBCC Technology Committee, so familiar with many of you in this room today. Excited to speak to you today, Yemi. We also have Mrs. Banke Meshida Lawal, who probably doesn't need introduction to a lot of you. I would say Banke was sort of single-handedly responsible for establishing the business of makeup artistry in Nigeria very, very many years ago. So she is the CEO of BM Pro Limited. She's the vice chairman of NBCC Cultural and Creative Sector. Again, very familiar to a lot of people in the room. As I say, Banke's ingenuity has really contributed to the emergence of the makeup industry in this country. It really didn't exist before her. There's a lot now, but she was really the first. And her use of technology in projecting her work has inspired many ladies to improve their skills and has given many women the opportunity to look and feel their best. So power panel today. I hope everyone is here. I see Yemi. Are you ready to bring the panel up? Fantastic. Okay, let's come on.
Take the pictures. Madam President, we'll take the pictures now before the panel starts due to the change in the program. So can we have members of the panel, President, Chairman of Council, first, before other members of Council and patrons. You can see that 100% we've embraced equity. All women cast. Okay, now we have our patrons to join them. Still. Patrons, past president. Me. DPR Telly, please. After this. Please wait. DPR Telly. Could we do the embrace equity sign, please? Mr. Adele was the first to do it. Let's put the attitude to the pictures, yes. Not is no account. Can we have members of council join them, please? We'll have council members take their seats, and ESCO members will now have their turn. Thank you. We have council members take their seats. ESCO members with DPR Tilly and Madam President, please. ESCO members. ESCO members here present. Last one. Shall I put Chairman Technology Group? Sorry, 1 minute. Applause for guests. So my job is done at the moment. I'll hand over to Ms. Sorensen to handle our panel. Yes.
Good morning, ladies. We're excited to have a very candid and very dynamic conversation this morning. And hopefully, at some point, if we don't run out of time, the audience can participate. I'm sure there'll be some questions, maybe even from the girls at Vivian Fowler. But so we're here to talk about, and actually it's quite nice that this event is happening a little bit after, all of the noise of International Women's Day last week, because I feel like everyone has sort of absorbed all the messaging and we can come here and maybe be a bit reflective this morning. But there's so much that's been said over the last week in this, International Women's Day season, if I can call it that, around equity. And I feel like for some of us, this is quite new. We've talked about diversity, we've talked about equality, and now it's equity. So let's maybe break down a little bit. What does that actually mean? I mean, we have all the stats that tell you that, having diversity and inclusion leads to better decisions, better discussions, better outcomes. That literally, including women in everything, from making investment decisions to running companies to sitting on boards, it just brings benefits. It reduces risk. It increases the value of and the quality of corporate governance. So governance is just better. Increases the actual value of businesses. So there's data that shows this to be the case, that when you have women involved in leadership, senior management, et cetera, that at least publicly traded companies are worth more than their counterparts without. And it increases the quality of products and services that are delivered. It ensures that products that are beneficial to a wide variety of demographics get funded that otherwise wouldn't, et cetera. So all of these benefits. So it feels like we've covered everything with at least the ideas of diversity and inclusion. But now we're talking about equity. So I want to maybe talk a little bit to start with what equity means to you. And again, because we're coming against the backdrop of International Women's Day, probably a lot of people by now have heard the example of the bicycle. So equality is giving everybody a bicycle. Equity is giving people the bicycle that actually fits their frame. But I find that quite abstract. We don't ride bicycles here in Nigeria, generally, as a rule. So let's talk on a more personal level about what this concept of equity means to you. And I'll start from Banke. We'll work down to Yemi.
Okay. Morning, everyone. Is this working? Yes, it is. I think my own idea of equity is giving people who are at a disadvantaged group sort of a leeway, be it in employment or work opportunities. I'll use my industry as an example. In my company, I would employ my driver's sister, my gateman's family member over someone who is a Harvard or a Yale graduate. Because I feel like that disadvantaged person needs a bit of a push and is probably more better appreciative of the opportunities available to her working in our company. That's my own understanding in layman's terms.
Thank you, Banke. Ada?
Thank you. So for me, I'm going to come from a very, very personal perspective, and I'll tell a story of a domestic staff I just hired. So we talk about equity. I mean, we've all heard the bicycle, the shoe that fits, etc. But in this case, I recently hired, and this I'm going to project this on the corporate and the public sector as well. So I recently hired a cleaner who, typically for domestic staff, if they're pregnant, they're scared that they don't get hired. And this is because, of course, the madam of the house wants someone who can work longer. So I was going to hire this lady. She didn't tell me she was pregnant. Once I mentioned medicals, she started telling stories of, she's not feeling well, she can't resume, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, just resume, let's start. You can have your medicals in 2 weeks. And for me, this consideration was because I realized that she's just 21 years old, had dropped out of school, and was living with her cousin. And I didn't think she was in a safe environment. So I just wanted to at least pull her out to and expose her to an environment that would get her thinking. So she came, and then I found out she was pregnant. Of course, immediately she got scared. She thought I was going to send her away. And I told her, look, I work in gender. I cannot advocate for getting women into the labor force and keep you out. This is an informal, workplace, but I owe you the responsibility of giving you a chance to work. And so she had the first few days of work. She was really diligent at it, paid attention to details, took instructions very clearly, and executed very well. She worked 3 times a week, but there was an issue. So for the outdoor, of course, she used the raffia broom, and I realized she was constantly bending. So I said to her, "You're squeezing your baby's eyes." And she said, that she's more comfortable with this broom. I said, no, try to bend at your knee. And then she tried it. I think she did that a bit, when I shared that with her. And then the next time I saw her sweeping. She was bent over. I said, you know what? Go get a long broom, because, for me, I want her to work, but I need to give her the tools to thrive and to succeed. So now she's working. I told her immediately, I realized she was pregnant, that, look, you don't need to stop working because you're pregnant. You can still work with me. You're only working 3 times a week. So you rest in between. And then whenever you're ready to stop, let me know. And I can plan a replacement. So she was really elated. And for me, I did that because, of the circumstances I shared earlier. And I believe she's not married to the guy who impregnated her. And I believed she would need the financial resources somewhere down the line. So she's still working. How does that translate to the corporate environment? So we want more women in leadership. We want more women in the workforce. We want more women in entrepreneurship. And as female entrepreneurs, we want more women to work, with businesses. But how do you enable that to happen? Because the circumstances are different. So in this case, for me, equity is creating fairness in how men and women access economic opportunities, optimize those economic opportunities, and are able to pass it on to others, and just creating that infrastructure and enabling environment for them to thrive. Thank you.
Which is very, very difficult to do. Very difficult. So you have, I'm in the tech field, and you have the engineers want to work from home. Some of them, you tell them to come, so they have 2 times a day. You have the human resources admin and all of the other people that are coming in every day and are seeing that those that are not coming in every day are getting more money than they are, and are asking you that they want to come in 3 or 4 times a day. And when you start to do that, you see them unable to be as productive as you would want them to be. And so for me, equity is something that's very difficult to manage in my industry. Combination of, if we talk about the gender aspect of it, I really try as best as possible to promote and persuade and motivate and incentivize the female tech woman. But at some point, you have to understand and be realistic to yourself that you're also dealing with millennials and Gen Zs. So it is good to say it is not, but it's not easy for us to implement. I mean, for me.
No, fair enough, and we'll definitely come back to this because I think there's a lot more to unpack when it comes to women in tech. Banky, I want to come back to you because you're probably unique amongst all of the rest of us sitting here who are working and operating in more male-dominated industries. Let's talk about your industry and how you see it. Obviously, we're talking about gender in the context of International Women's Day. There's a lot of other examples of where there's disequity. And I love, that you started with talking about your personal, staff at home and the people that you tend to engage. But I wonder, even in an industry that is gender dominant towards women, the concept of equity, how does it play out? Because a lot of the women who are starting out in this industry are not starting out with very much. They're not coming from families that have set them up, etc. So how does this concept of equity play out in your industry?
So I always use myself as an example. I didn't start with maybe daddy giving me money to open a store. Everything that I did, I started in Unilag painting people's faces and charging them for it. Saving that money, eventually opening my first studio on Romans Road. So there's really nobody's going to come and help anybody. Once you understand that, then you're able to project, you're able to fund your dreams. In this industry, we have a lot more women than men. But that's not to say that I think the men are even more disadvantaged in this place. The equity is for the men. But once you have some certain traits, you're hardworking, you're diligent, you want to grow, you want to assimilate, whether you're female or male, you will thrive. But because it's International Women's Day and the conversation is geared toward women, another example, you're pregnant, like she says. So for pregnant staff or people women who are getting married, you have to sort of tweak the rules and accommodate their, whatever excuses they may have. But that's not to say that it's not possible to run a completely female-dominated company in the beauty space.
So let's I'm going to probe a little bit more. We all know the examples elsewhere, particularly in the US, where women have built empires. From makeup, mm-hmm. whether it's as makeup artists or from product development, from actually makeup and beauty products. Here, you are probably one of our best examples of that. BM Pro is, in its own right, is an institution here. But there definitely seems to be that gap. So, and because we're sitting, our host, the NBCC, I feel like we should maybe move the conversation into how do we go from enterprising young girls at university who are painting people's faces to helping them establish small to medium-sized businesses to actually then turning those into institutions. The pathway that you followed, I feel like there is definitely there's an equity conversation to be had there. Is it about access to capital? Is it about these women being taken seriously? What's that barrier that's preventing them from from just carrying their makeup bags, to various people's houses on Saturday to actually building businesses?
Okay, so, any business that solves a problem will thrive. For me, I started with wanting to make women more confident and beautiful. So I would go in and do someone's makeup, for instance, and she feels like she can own the world after the session. She's more confident. Then she goes on to take, maybe it's a headshot, or she attends an event and she's just all over the place and, very confident. For young girls that want to become makeup artists, if you're able to solve a problem, so if you decide, now I'm even more of a photographer, so I would do the makeup and I would photograph my client and present them with, if it's headshots or family portraits, and I do a lot for the older women, and I always say that everyone should get their parents to have a beautiful photograph. I'm not saying you're urging them to go and die, but when they do pass on, the memories that you would preserve is excellent. I'm beginning to solve that problem for people, and I started as a makeup artist. Like I said, now I do a lot more photography. Solving a problem. So whatever business that you want to do as a young girl, make it one that solves a problem, that provides a solution to people, and it will thrive.
So I love that a lot. I have to say that a lot of the language about equity is about how do we enable women to do this, how do we make sure, whereas I think the message is coming from Banker is very powerful, which is find the problem that you want to solve, in which case you're taking up space and you are, you're taking agency. I find that very powerful. Thank you. Ada, let's talk a little bit about the work that the IFC is doing. We just heard from Mr. Wane from UN Women Nigeria, and I'm sure the IFC is at least as active in promoting gender equity, gender equality. So tell us about some of your work.
Thanks a lot. Before I get to your question, I just wanted to jump on Yemi Kerry's initial comment about the difficulty in creating or promoting equity, and it is true. However, one of the things I've found in working with, and I'll share a bit more about the program, in working with CEOs of private sector companies, is that they're consistently understanding the fact that if you're going to create an environment that works for both men and women, then there needs to be how do they put it? There needs to be a disproportionate allocation of resources. Yes. Now, in one of the companies that I work with, they're actually running into a certain kind of problem, which, depending on how you look at it, it could be a good problem or not a good one. But for me, I believe that every problem comes with its solution in it. So this organization has disproportionately allocated funds or resources to support women, and the male staff now feel disenfranchised. So we had this conversation with them, and they're like, look, IFC, you need to help us engage the men as well. So there's also that conversation. So for us as IFC, we come from the perspective of one of the interventions is engaging men and boys as allies as well. And I think that there's a lot of gap in that space, right? Even though the awareness is growing now, but interventions are not at par, right? But I just wanted to spotlight that here to say that engaging men and boys is really, really important. And then understanding that enabling equity requires a certain level of investment. So Yemi, for instance, will probably need to invest in some tech infrastructure. I don't know how it works. I don't want to dabble into that space, right? We'll probably need to make some extra investments that she didn't have to. And if I were to use the example I gave earlier, I had to invest in cleaning materials for this lady just to ensure that, she's able to deliver her work at the time that she's with us. So that being said, now to your question about ISC. So we have different interventions that we have implemented. Our approach to gender equality and equity is two-pronged. One is by implementing stand-alone programs that help to promote the advancement of women's economic empowerment in the markets where we operate. And then the other is to mainstream gender in our investment operations, in our investments and advisory services. So we're investing in companies, and then we're speaking to them to say, okay, how do we strengthen positive outcomes for women? So those two approaches are how we tackle the gender conversation. In Nigeria particularly, I would focus on a program that is currently running, and IFC partnered with the Nigerian-British. And I'm mentioning that here because NBCC is in that position to also do the same by finding partners. So we partnered with the Nigerian-British to rally CEOs of some of the most capitalized companies on the exchange, and they have made specific measurable commitments, right, to close gender gaps within their business operations. Now, there was a Harvard Business Review that I looked at, some months ago that had talked about how, from a survey of 1,000 companies, 81% of those companies agreed that it was important to have a gender equality agenda at the organization. But how many actually did it? It was just 42%, or 41% actually. So less than half, Now what that means is people are aware. There's a continuum, right? People are aware that, look, we need to do this. We need to embrace equity. But how do we embrace equity? And I loved how you started. Now we need to be more reflective and say, how do we actually implement what we're speaking about? So that's where IFC came in, to say to the CEOs, we know you're aware that, companies with a gender equal leadership and a gender equal workforce thrive and outperform their peers who are not. But we want to help you develop and implement. So they made commitments very specific as setting targets for increasing the number of women on their boards, number of senior management staff, as specific as setting up childcare infrastructure at their organizations, reviewing their flexible work policies, reviewing their parental leave and maternity leave policies, as specific as setting up mentoring networks within the organizations, very specific, and measurable as well. And it was time-bound, so the program is running for a period of time, and we're constantly tracking. Now, we're not just policing, we're also enabling the internal capacities of these organizations. So we have a peer learning platform that all of these organizations belong to, and we expose them to tools, best practices, and experts that help them build their internal capabilities to deliver. And then we know that for investments to be made, data is required. So as part of that program, we're also deepening the data that is available across some thematic areas to strengthen the business case for investments in those areas. So those are some of the interventions that we're currently implementing, and it's been really fantastic and inspiring, the activities and the commitment that these CEOs have had. It's the Nigeria to Equal program. I'll pause there so that I don't take up much more time. And I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ada. Very, very exciting. I mean, it's so clear to see that the IFC is obviously operating at the policy level, but also hands-on and driving initiatives, as you say, very granular initiatives even at the company level, and that's fantastic. Yumi, I appreciate your honesty. So I'm excited to bring it to you because I want to talk about, you started, as Ada said, really appreciate you talking about how this equity thing, we can have the conversations, but it's challenging. We need to acknowledge that. So I really want to, in this next question, encourage you to think about how we affect real change. So how do we go beyond the box checking and performative commitments? When you hear the statistics around how many people acknowledge that something needs to be done about gender, how many companies versus how many companies actually do anything about it, half. How do we really achieve accountability, change, progress? And I hope you can answer that question in the context of the technology industry. Obviously, the theme for this year's International Women's Day was digital, so innovation, technology for gender equality. And when we think about the tech sector across the spectrum of women as tech founders, women as investors, women as employees at tech businesses, product developers, software developers, women as consumers of some of these products. Across the spectrum, how do we achieve equity, right? And it's such a thriving ecosystem here in Nigeria, but, afraid that we will make the mistakes that Silicon Valley and all of these other places that have, acute gender problems. Afraid that we will go ahead and make those mistakes. So how do we now, while it's still such a nascent sector, how do we achieve real change here? It's a big question.
Exam question. It has to be multifaceted. Education, culture, industries. I think that we have young girls from Holy Child and Vivian Fowler, am I right, here? And it is from this kind of exposures that they start to understand the realities of life. And so for me, education is very critical. From the basics to all the way to the tertiary, and even education while you're at work. Education while in the workplace, making your employees understand the issues of bias, unconscious bias, issues of equity, making the young boys that come from the suburban areas understand that you don't talk to a woman like that. It is a cultural thing as well. What we're trying to do, all of this IWD and all of these things, is that we are trying to forge ahead and shift that kind of culture that has been there for years and say that we are no longer in the kitchen, right? Our role is changing. Our roles are changing. And so we have been fighting for this shift. And this shift is generational, right? And so I have people that we employ. A lot of these young minds are from backgrounds where their sisters can't talk to them. Their father talks to their mother anyhow. And so they bring it to the workplace. And you have to make them also understand that, look, that girl, she's your mate. You earn the same salary. So don't tell me that she has to go and do it. Why? You know, and you know, it's time consuming, but you have to do it. So it's educational. I mean, we're talking here, we're in the city, we're in the private sector, we're all sitting down here. Let me take you back to the rural areas, right? We're talking about women in politics. The nomenclature alone of woman leader is biased. How do we get past that? But all of the political parties talk about women leaders. And who are the women leaders? The women leaders are the women that are organize the market women. So it's already, you know, I don't know what the word is. So if you go back there and you're looking at politics, and we're saying women need to get into the political realm, politics is rural, right? And at that level, I can count how many ward local or local government chairmen are women, even at that level. So we need to start educating from that level. So education is key. Culture is key. Go back to the rural areas. Who is doing the work in the kitchen? Who is going to the farm? Who is... I mean, there was... I can't remember the area I was going, somewhere in the Middle Belt. I drive around Nigeria a lot, where I go and look for work. I saw women on bicycles with the firewood, you know, and I'm thinking, where are the men? You know, and so really for us to shift this generational thing, right? We're doing what we know how to do, talking. But we need to implement. We need to implement, and it starts from each one of us. That's the way I would say it. Each one of us. The IFC is doing something, but what are we all doing ourselves?
No, thank you. I mean, and I'm glad you brought us to politics. I mean, I think it's fascinating. If we could just let's talk about that for a couple of minutes. It's relevant, right? Look at where we are right now in our electoral cycle, and it's interesting because the data shows there is clear evidence that shows that countries that make the most progress with advancing gender policies, so those are policies that will specifically benefit the welfare of women and girls, are those those countries where there are very well-defined pathways for women to participate in office. We're talking about the local government level, that's the grassroots type politics, or for women to run for office and for women to actually win, so credibly participate in politics. You know, just looking right now at the federal level, the state level, but the local level, what do you think the prospects are for female participation in politics? I mean, because you're right that actually, and as you say, as the evidence shows, unless women are participating beyond the level of organizing, ideology, you know, then we're not getting policy that's really going to move the needle. So what are the prospects? And Banke, if you have any thoughts on this, please jump in.
So I also have that question. Are there really women participating in politics at the highest level, and are they really making a difference? Or they're just figureheads? You know, it's still the men that you have to go to if you want to do something tangible in government. It's a question.
Culturally, the men lead. And it has been there for years. I keep going back to it's generational. At the political realm, I mean, the women leaders are very powerful women because they have the numbers in terms of the gender, right? And the men need the gender, so they become very powerful. But then, if you go a step further, apart from the votes that the woman is bringing, what else is she doing on the table? The governors and they have to try and put forward women, encourage women to go out to be local government chairmen or chairwomen, right? And that would change a lot of things because those local government chairwomen if they get into that role, we'll be able to pave the way for all the women that are coming in. But it's very few and far between. It has to be a deliberate effort by the political parties.
There's a I don't know if it's a conspiracy, but there's a lady in government. She comes to tell us how the federal government is giving people 5,000 naira. I don't know if you know that woman. She's from the north, and she talks about something that they need billions of naira to do, and it just irks your soul. So I think they've actually put her there. Maybe you want to be included. Go and start. And all of the things she says just sounds so ridiculous. And it just brings us right back.
Yes, the ticking of boxes is not only in the political sector, it's also in our corporate environment. Women on board, women do this, women that, but they have no voice, right? And so we need to be very careful that we're not just ticking the boxes. So it is in almost all sectors. And if you are a woman that has gone past a certain level, you need to start paving the way for those that are coming in. Otherwise, we'll still remain this way. And
exactly.
So, yeah.
So, and again, perfect segue. I mean, I want us to bring it to the level of the personal, right? So we're talking about our work, and we're talking about, but now I'm curious about each of you in your personal or professional lives. How do you think, if you have, benefited from this idea of equity? Maybe let's start with you, Ada. Do you feel like you've at any point in your career you have benefited from having gained equity?
Yes, I have. And again, they're personal experiences, but they're personal experiences that I can now share with corporate leaders that I engage and with CEOs, so that the policies and practices that they also implement or put in place in their own organization enables women. So I'll share two in particular. And just to give you a heads up, I'm going to come back to a comment on, not exactly politics, but just an observation I had there. So the specific examples are mentoring and parental leave. So I got, how we talk about the talent pipeline and the leak in the talent pipeline and how women do not progress to senior and executive leadership because at some point they drop off. So at some point in my own career, mid-level, I was in that dilemma as well. I happened to have 3 men as children. So at each of those times, I needed to reconsider my priorities. And I think the first time when I considered dropping, how they say, when your priorities are like balls, drop one, face the other. And I thought, let me drop career, face family. And then I had a male and a female mentor. So there's a mentoring program at the organization where I spent the most of my career. And I had, for key talents, we had specific mentors assigned to us. So this male mentor, when I got pregnant with my 3rd child, I was almost ashamed to show up at meetings because I was like, oh, geez, I'm going to think this lady is not serious. She's not ready for growth. So I'd move around with my bag in front of me, and it really didn't help with a male colleague saying to me, Ada, it's like every time we see you're pregnant. I'm like, hey, No, of course, he didn't mean to hurt, but it did hurt. I even had one who came to my office one time, and he goes, what am I seeing? I'm like, what exactly are you seeing? He says, is that pregnancy? I said, yes. Can it happen to my wife? And I was thinking, hey, please. But anyway, I had this male mentor who is now a director at the organization. And, I went into his office, and he was like, hey, you're looking moody. So I shared what the issue was. And then he helped me to refocus. And he said to me, look, don't allow your career get in the way of building your family. And he talked about how his children are always a safe haven for him. After all the, corporate, in quotes, madness, You go home, see your family, calm down, you're happy, And so he sort of helped me to recenter. And then I also had a female mentor who helped me to focus on setting career goals in that period and meeting them. So I didn't feel like I was left out. Now, in that same pregnancy, interestingly, so at the time I was leading the Women's Market Program, and we had just implemented the 6-month maternity leave. Now, at the time when we were advocating for this, I didn't know I was going to be pregnant. But hey, alas, I was the first employee in the organization to use it. So, and then it made it really easy to come back to work because it helped me settle with the child. And then 6 months later, I could go back to work, ease in. And in fairness, because of the career goals I had set and met before I went on maternity leave, I got promoted in the same period. So I also I wasn't penalized for having a child and going on maternity leave. So yes, I have benefited from it, and that helped me to stay on in the course of my career.
Amazing. Amazing. No, Ada, we all really deeply appreciate you sharing that story. Maybe I in particular, because one thing that really irks me is when, sometimes you ask women, there's a certain type of women, if you ask them, how did you're so successful, how did this happen? Share. There's some women who will say to you, I just worked hard. And I was just very passionate and driven, and one day, voila. But it's impossible. We all know that, as Ada said, whether it's mentorship, whether it's having had the privilege of coming up in an enabling environment, good parental leave policy, there's always going to be something. I'm speaking now to the young ladies from Vivian Fowler and Holy Child. Understand that there are things, I want to talk about you taking agency and making your own luck, etc. But actually, everyone who has found success has been helped in some way along the way. It's very important that we acknowledge it, because I think, sometimes we project, images, down towards the next generation that are a little unrealistic. And by the way, Ada mentioned mentorship. There's something very important to understand the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. So mentorship is very important, and we all need mentors. And, those are the people who will guide us along the way, almost be our own private, think tanks and help you make good decisions, etc. A sponsor you also need. And a sponsor is different from a mentor. So a sponsor is someone who can champion you, who can open doors for you, someone who will advocate for you in spaces where you're not even there and you're not even aware that person is putting you forward. That's a sponsor. Everyone needs a sponsor in addition to a mentor. So understand the difference and use that in your life. But because this question has been so powerful, I want to give the rest of the panel the opportunity to talk about, if you feel you've benefited from equity in your own life, please tell us about it.
As an employer of labor, I think COVID also let all of us know that it's possible to be productive and not be on site. So implementing laws that favor women and, for example, pregnant staff or women who are unable to come in 5 days a week is also possible. With COVID, we all thought the world was ending, but it didn't end, and there were some services that continued. So if you think along those lines, you will be able to give your staff a break, especially the female ones.
Sisiemi?
Equity.
Has it made a difference for you?
It actually has. I have experienced. I worked in the government for some time, right? And I was a young girl coming from the private sector. I didn't even know what the public sector was all about. I've been working in the cocoon of an international corporate. And when I got into Benin, I was lost. I was lost to the point that I didn't even know what I was doing. But I was amongst politicians and civil servants. And the governor at that time had to brought a couple of us, so I wasn't alone. But he had to help me in order for me to be stable within that environment. whether it was biases of who is this small girl coming here to tell us what we've been doing, this is how we do it, or creating that opportunity for me to be able to do my work effectively within that environment. Multiple examples of things that could have if we didn't have a leader. So that brings us to the point that even at that was part of where I learned that, you need to really create an enable environment for almost each of your employees in the workspace, because I enjoyed that. I mean, even in my earlier, I always do enjoy it somehow, So yes, I have, and it is sometimes tantamount to favoritism. It's like, oh, she always gets her way. But it is equity, just trying to make me balance between all of the men and all of the people in the environment. But you would then think that you're being, a favorite.
As we said earlier, some rebalancing needs to happen. Yeah. It's necessary. So I'm conscious we have participants online, so let me quickly, and then maybe I can also try and get one or two questions from the room. But let me throw out one question from online participants to the panel, and anyone who feels moved can please take this one. So, we're talking about equity, and I guess the focus is really on gender in the context of International Women's Day. But this person is asking about how to ensure that various initiatives are accessible and inclusive to young girls and women with disabilities and potentially other impairments, so visual, mobility, hearing, and other disabilities which may not even be physically apparent. So how do we identify and bridge such gaps so that we can truly promote empowerment and embrace equity on a more broad level?
Well, I'll take it from an IFC perspective and the interventions that we implement in the market. So when we're working with the corporates, like the ones so specifically under the Nigeria to Equal program, and we have this kind of programs all across the region in Africa. We had one in Tanzania that we just closed, which is called Finance to Equal, and that focused on a sector. When we're talking about policies and practices in the workplace, we also introduce disabilities. So when you were reading the question, there's one aspect of disability that is not, so the invisible disabilities as well, that people are not aware of. So in helping companies build or design their DEI policies, we ensure that perspective is also integrated and not just gender, right? So for us, because we do not directly implement the policies, but we enable those policies to be designed and implemented by the private sector, we think that we are obliged, and it is our role, right? It is in our role to point them in that direction, make them aware, and help them to identify how best to implement it within their own corporate strategy. Because again, it varies from one organization to the other, how they would implement those policies. First of all, a lot of the organizations are not even aware that they need to have these policies in place. So I think that's one way that we can have.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Ada. There's one more question I've been sent from an online participant. So it's interesting, because I think we started the conversation talking about, making the case for gender and specifically for gender equity. But this person is asking about what's the market opportunity for gender equity, saying that, I know, for instance, a lot of organizations are doing it on the face level, they're doing it for branding, or even to source for ethical funds or gender-specific funds. How do we present the market opportunities and, really make a case for gender equity? So we've touched a little bit on this, but does anyone want to give a fuller response to this about how we make it real as opposed to just checking the box? What's the market opportunities? It comes down to data, doesn't it?
I think that to make it real, we all have to be very deliberate about it. I don't know what the data is now in terms of, I don't know what the data is, but to make it real, we have to be very deliberate about it. We have to put certain policies in place within our various organizations that would aid for gender. I know even data sometimes is not really, it doesn't help when you say 13% of the women here are this, that, and then you want to make it up to 30%, and then you have to just fill the gap. I think that's what the person is talking about, right? But it has to be something that is very measurable, and that would definitely make an impact on businesses. So I'm not going to take somebody that is not skilled because I want to fill up the space, because my business has to grow. So I don't know. It has to be very deliberate. That's what I would say.
I absolutely agree. So I'll wrap up this part of the panel by asking each of our panelists to.
I'd like to just.
Yes, please.
Add to that, to say that I think the question was, for how I interpreted it, was how do you get organizations to understand the business case for investing in gender equity and equality, or equitable gender equality, right? I'll give a very specific example. I mentioned the business case and researches that we're having now under the Nigeria to Equal program. One specific research that we're currently working on, and I'll explain why. So this is looking at the cost of violence, bullying, and harassment in the workplace, the cost to Nigerian businesses. So we talk about it, and in the Nigerian context, it's more tuned to domestic violence as opposed to violence, harassment, and bullying at work. So one of the data points that we now want to introduce into the market is what is the true cost, the dollar cost, the naira cost to businesses when you do not pay attention to these things. So we have companies participating, and we're going to come out with the numbers so that it is tangible, so that a company can say, hey, I'm losing this amount of money just because I do not have policies or practices that address these issues. Now, when you're talking to the business community, it is important that you have that information, because a CEO first of all, right, is there to ensure that the business is a going entity, to ensure that the business continues to make money. So you have to be able to speak that language. So when you're speaking to the private sector and to businesses, you shouldn't only come from the social side of gender equity and equality, but there has to be the business case, and that is an instrument to be used and leveraged.
Absolutely, thank you for that, Ada. Banke, can we come back to you? I'd like us to wrap at least this part of the panel by either giving a call to action on embracing equity. So, and obviously that call to action, I think, would be more directed towards peers or senior women, senior champions, or a word of advice. And it's very apt because we have some young ladies in the room. So maybe it's a word of advice to up and coming, those who are still students, or actually those who are already trying to establish their businesses. So young professionals, young entrepreneurs just starting out. So over to you, Banke.
In all things, I like to be practical. Someone looking for work, for example, should not hope to get employed because of gender laws. You still need to have some certain skills that would make your employer want to take you on. You have to be hardworking, you have to be diligent, integrity, all of those things. So irrespective, first, of whether you're male or female, you should possess those characteristics. Moving away from that, if you want to start any business, like I said, make it make sense. Let it address and solve a problem. Be very hardworking. All of these things are things you must possess so that you can forge on and become successful in whatever field you find yourself in. So for the young people, yes, we talked about people sponsoring you and having mentors, but you yourself first, as an individual, you must want to succeed. and you must put in the work.
Thanks for that, Banke. Ada? Call to action or word of advice?
Okay, I'll direct this to two angles. Yeah, so the young girls first. And I think that one thing, in reflecting about my younger self, one thing that I know now that I wish I knew then would be the power of my voice and influence at whatever level. So you might be sitting in this room, you're in secondary school today, and you're thinking, oh, what are these people talking about? I have jump or something, or exams, in front of me. How is this going to help me? But I think that, first of all, drawing from what Banke has shared is the power of diligence. So the diligence that you apply academically, you need it in life. But also recognize that irrespective of where you are, you might not be in the corporate space now, you're in the academic space, but you have a voice and you have influence. Women are often, there's this thing that they say, give women a voice, but recognize that you already have a voice. Just use it. Now, what am I trying to say? Right there in your school, which is an organization, you can create change, you can make change, you can create value. You can be a person of influence and impact, right? And, create lasting change that can be traced back to you even after you leave school. And you begin to build from that into your integration in the broader society. So that's for younger people to say, recognize that you have a voice. Don't see something and look away. If you need to speak, speak. Don't say, oh, who's going to listen to me? Use the voice. And it also translates to us that are not in secondary schools. So I don't want to say older women, because we're all young women, to say that let's use our power and influence, right? We talk about leaving the door open, opening doors, but a lot of times we forget that we actually have power and influence at whatever level we are. You might not be the CEO, but there's some influence that you can exert to make things better for other people. I shared about how I got to benefit from the 6 months maternity leave in my previous organization. When we were pushing for that, I didn't know that I was going to need it. But because of my role in the organization, I had that power and influence at the time, which now I don't, because I cannot go into the organization to say, hey, do this. But that was implemented, and people are benefiting from it today. So let's use it.
I think that we need to, we need to first of all understand that the journey to you getting to successful or the top of your business doing well is very tough. We need to understand also that as a woman, it is tougher. It is tougher because at a particular point in your life, you have to decide on what is much more important to you. But we also need to tell the younger women that too shall pass. It is important that you begin to create supports around you that you can tap in, whether it's a cluster of friends, whether it's a cluster of your family, whether it's a cluster of your work colleagues. It is important that you create that relationship because you would always need it at one point in time in your life while you're going up the ladder. Banke and Ada have said it. You have to develop yourself. As a woman, you have to go the extra mile to develop. So when you open your mouth, somebody will vouch for you. So that sponsor that is talking about you somewhere where you are not, understand that she's making a bet on you. So you have to, always develop yourself. Gain the knowledge. Before coming here, I read, it's true. You go and you have to educate self-development. It's what is here that makes you different from the other woman. So it is also important that you understand that, so that you're not saying that they're not giving me equity in the workplace. All of the guys are doing, and I am not the. When you come into work late, and you have to be able to earn, so that your voice is heard when you speak. So for me, that is self-development is very key, very important. Your values are very key, very important. Integrity is one of such, and you have to keep it real. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all, ladies. I mean, look, I won't even attempt to top it. I think I'll add a little bit to it. And this is kind of an extension of what Yemi, in fact, what everyone is saying, which is bet on yourself. And what do I mean by bet on yourself? So the smartest people never stop learning. You have to continually be investing in yourself. You heard Yemi say that before this morning she studied and thought about what she was going to say. It might look easy, but people, the most successful people are working at it constantly, always trying to figure out. In fact, there's something I like to say to the more junior folks in my office. When they talk about the smartest person in the room, I want to be in a room where I'm the dumbest person in the room. Why? I'm going to learn from everybody in that room. I'm not leaving that room until I understand, or at least have an appreciation of what you know. Continue to bet on yourself and invest in yourself. Never stop learning. The second thing is also an extension. On what's been said as well. I think, particularly as women and as young women, when you haven't made all the mistakes yet, you still have clear runway in front of you. Be very intentional about improving the quality of your decision making. What do I mean by that? Let me focus on one particular decision one decision in particular, because I think it's probably the one that has the most impact on a woman's ability to thrive in the professional world, to succeed, to move up, and to attain this success, whatever that means to you. If you think about the decision of who is going to be your life partner, what all these women have said, if I can capture it in one thing, that person that you intend to spend, if not the rest of your life, but certainly a big portion of your life, that person is going to make such a huge difference to what you're going to be able to do, to how ambitious you're going to be able to be, to how supported you're going to feel, to even honestly your sense of confidence, when you go out in the world every day. You cannot underestimate how important it is to choose a supportive partner, and a partner who understands and appreciates what you want out of life and is aligned with you in helping you to get there. So that's all I'll say about that. Let's be thinking about our decision making. But I also just want to really thank the NBCC team for bringing all these women. I've certainly enjoyed the last hour. I want to thank Mrs. Bisiade, me, Tajudeen Ahmed, DG, Doris, and the team for organizing this and bringing us all together today. Thank you.
We appreciate members of the panel once more. They weren't just brilliant, they were just as brilliant as they were beautiful. I think their presentations were very profound. Let's appreciate them again, please. We're going to play a video on embracing equity from the chamber. This video is a composite of ladies' comments regarding embracing equity. May we have the video, please?
I'm I'm Dr. Janet.
My name is Tenny Stockman. My name is Dr. My name is Nicola.
I'm Yemi. The strength of a woman, it's hidden. When she's opportune to exert that strength, she exceeds expectations, leaps and bounds.
I celebrate the resilience of a woman, her ability to multitask and yet produce excellent results in a seemingly effortless manner.
We need to recognize and embrace our uniqueness, because being a woman in a team of all men gives you a unique voice. We shouldn't be afraid to put ourselves forward in men-dominated industry.
Each time a woman stands up for herself, she stands up for all women.
Women belong in all places where decisions are made.
I celebrate all our women today because you have the power to showcase your strength and bring out that super energetic, tenacious, and successful you.
Dear woman, you deserve admiration. Receive your accolades with grace.
Embrace equity.
Embrace equity.
Embrace equity.
Embrace equity.
Embrace equity.
Embrace unity.
Good day, everyone. Today I want to talk about the importance of embracing equity and how it can help us achieve success for all. Let's start by defining what we mean by embracing equity. Equity to me means equality in a society whereby women have their rights respected and are paid diligently. Embracing equity to me means that regardless of gender, status, or living conditions, all people are given the same opportunities.
Embracing equity means to have my political opinion as a woman valued as much as a man's.
Embracing equity means every individual having the right to make major life decisions without being opposed in any way.
Equity to me is equal opportunities for everyone, so that no one feels threatened by what they can and cannot do.
To me, embracing equity means helping to forge harmony and unity in the society.
In conclusion, embracing equity is crucial for creating a fair and just society, where everyone is given equal opportunities to succeed. By promoting fairness, justice, and diversity, we can forge harmony and unity, which can help drive success for all. Hashtag embracing equity.
Good day. I would like to appreciate the National-British Chamber of Commerce for granting us this opportunity to educate the young ones out there on the topic embracing equity. I'm happy to be a girl child. My name is Uli Amati. I'm here with Adeyemi Damsola and Eme Iwanabo. International Women's Day, IWD, is a day set aside globally to celebrate women around the world. It is annually held on the 8th day of March. It celebrates the cultural, social, political, and economical activities in women's life, as well as focusing on vices such as gender inequality, rights of women, women being incapacitated, women dignity, violence and abuse against women, girl-child education, among others.
Research has shown before now that women were literally not allowed to participate in health, politics, education, and any other important aspect of the society, which resulted to low self-esteem, thereby disallowing them to participate in the day-to-day evolutionary activities in the society. Like Sarah Jibril, who contested for Nigeria presidential primary elections in 2011 and got only 4 votes. Are we saying Nigeria is only male dominant? No, it isn't. March 8th in history is a day set aside to celebrate women around the world after they gained freedom in Soviet Russia in 1917. That is the beginning of February Revolution, consequently making the 8th day in March a public holiday.
In my own opinion, equity, that is the balance of rights amongst men and women, especially in status, rights, functionalities, or even opportunities in the society should be a major guideline for coexistence between male and female gender in any community.
Crises like racism, culture, gender-based violence, economic discriminations are reasons why we are yet to achieve equality in the world today. Hence, for a woman to succeed in a male-dominated environment, she must cultivate the act of self-confidence, stay positive. She must understand that the beauty of a woman is not in her looks, but in her mind. She should care about being respected than being liked. She should have self-dignity. She needs to be offensive and not always defensive. They should play down emotions, which leads to gossip and low self-esteem. Women like Ada Lovelace, who was the first computer programmer, like Ransom Kuti, who was the first female to drive a car. In conclusion, men must learn to support women. They must listen to their ideas fairly. They must not discriminate them regardless of their situation. Happy International Women's Day. Thank you and have a nice day.
We carried our dirty linen to the stream to wash happily, hoping they would dry. We didn't foresee any kind of bloom, but we even washed the clothes we had on. Seated on the rocks, warmed by the sun, we waited for our clothes to dry to return home. But suddenly, there was a great gloom that went so fast and swallowed our sun, leaving us naked, watching the stream. They took our song. They took our song and killed our fun. Our mother was all we had. Our son is gone. She died looking for a boy child because of the family pressure that believes that boys are treasures and girls can measure up. We want to talk. We want to speak our mind, but instead we're told to shut up. Why? Because we're girls. It's all about the boys. Boys here, boys there. Aren't we enough? Boys are given different privileges and opportunities and more attention. Like it's a crime to be a girl in this part of the world. Mom, you might be dead and gone, but we will immortalize you. We will make sure that girls are never trivialized in our society again. We will ensure that we prove that we are not a weak gender. But nothing ever stops you leaving. When I'm coming home, I'm on. Like it, like, say I like it like that. Like it, like, say I like it like that. Like it, like that. Like it, like, say I like it like that. Like it, like that. Go away. Don't you know too much already? All only hurt you if you let me.
The solemn video that I just watched, where we gave the young girls from QC and other schools another round of applause, please. Don't worry, on behalf of the men, the paradigm is changing. It has changed. May I call Mrs. Sholakwe Akinpelu, the chairman of our technology group, to come and give the vote of thanks. After the short vote of thanks, Madam President will present gifts to our panelists that are still here. Mrs. Akinpelu. May we welcome her.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed. Good morning, everyone. It's been a beautiful one, and I believe that my job is quite simple. Is to give vote of thanks to all the people who have made this possible this morning. I would like to say thank you so much on behalf of the chamber, to thank especially the guest speaker, Mr. Lansana Wone. Thank you so much. Our panelist, Ms. Ada Udechukwu, thank you for those brilliant insights. Ms. Yemi Kerry and Ms. Banke Lawal, thank you for leaning in so much. And to our moderator, she's left now, but I always say that moderators' jobs are usually like a movie director. So you can have the right cast, but without the right director, you don't get the best. She did a great job with that. So to Ms. Niros Oyegun Sorensen, our patrons and council members, thank you so much. Our sponsors, Bank of Industry, I think we should give them a round of applause, please. They made this possible. To yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, both, we have a field room. It's quite impressive with the theater sitting with over 100 participants online. It's been a great event for us. The programs committee, thank you, and the NBCC headquarters as well. Thank you so much to everyone. So I'll just announce the upcoming event and a huge call. The first one is the call for application to the NBCC Tech Academy induction ceremony, which is scheduled for March 23, 2023, just next week. It's a final call to register and a final call to charge. We're almost filled up. But most importantly, it's also a call to us as individuals and as corporates, responsible corporate citizens as well. We still need sponsors. So before the IWD event tagged Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. So NBCC had gone ahead. You can say that we are quite proactive as we are with everything. And we have a gender slant with the NBCC Tech Academy where we have more slots, for women to bridge that gender gap. Data or no data. So you see data saying between 13%, 15% of women, of people in STEM are women. And that's a huge lopsidedness. So to bridge that gap, we call on talk to myself. We have the HQ out there for sponsorships. And if you know people who want to participate, transition into STEM, please let them talk to us. Also, the NBCC-led training program is scheduled for March 29 and 30 on the Positive Workplace. You're all invited to participate. Discounts are also available. The NBCC members' evening induction ceremony is scheduled for March 30. The NBCC Agric and Export Trade Group event is scheduled for May 4. Interested candidates and corporates are invited to participate. Register with the Chamber's website or any of our social media handles. Then the 2023 trade mission to the UK, London and Birmingham is scheduled for May 21 to 27. Interested individuals and corporates are also invited to participate. It's filling up so fast as well. The Plaza, as you see, is open with state-of-the-art facilities for you to explore for your corporate events, trainings, seminars, and meetings at an affordable rate. You can reach out to the Chamber HQ members to make inquiries and reservations. We would love your feedback. Please scan the barcode on the screen. Yes, to fill out your feedback form. We thrive on feedback. Please send your feedback. You can scan the barcode to share your feedback. It's a gift we treasure so much. So if you're interested, most importantly, if you're interested in becoming a member of the Chamber, please visit our website, www.nbcc.org.ng. I'll take that again, www.nbcc.org.ng, or meet with the membership team at the registration desk out there. Finally, please follow us on social media to be informed of all our activities, as this and many more. I always say NBCC is value dense. I mean, we juice value up right here. It will be an honor to have you join us. And most importantly, let's say again, if you know women especially who want to transition into tech, we take 3 different tracks: product design, UI, UX, digital media, and software engineering. Please let them reach out. It's the final call for the NBCC Tech Academy and a final call for sponsorships. So ask our sponsors. They always go away with a lot of goodwill, and posterity does them well. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mrs. Sholakwe Akinpelu, for that profound word of thanks. I will invite Madam President to present gifts to our panelists that are here. First with Ms. Adare Udochukwu. Madam President. Will you give her a round of applause? Next is Mrs. Banke Meishida Lawal. Ms. Lawal, you need to give us some money for pronouncing your name very, very well. It's actually Meishida, so people don't pronounce it well. So I also read, like Ms. Kerry did. Thank you for being on the panel. Yes. Easy does it, and that's the end. We thank you all for coming again, and we welcome you at our next event. Let's mingle and socialize. Thank you. Okay. I'm told that there's an executive smile at the stand there. Ladies are very, very keen on doing such things, so you're welcome. Just outside. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.